A lot of people talk about breath work and calming techniques that we can do with breathing. And I respect that and we need that. A lot of us are just kind of addicted to panicking, so there is so much space for that and that is needed. But that is not what I'm going to talk about today because I believe that the breath serves many purposes. It's literally what keeps us alive at a constant rate. And so I'm going to talk today about how we use our breath when we're angry, when we're passionate, when we're sad, and all the ways that it just comes and goes in us every single day. And the way that I'm going to do that is by first telling you what one of these near-death experiences that I had was, because, ever since I came into this eighth house knowledge, I've been reflecting on just how close to death I have been on many occasions and come out the other side. So I'm going to talk about one of those because it actually is very closely related to breath. I'm going to talk about pain again because I believe that it's really important that I do, and there's people who need to hear this. And I'm going to talk just more about collective healing. And in case you're wondering, yes, this is my bathrobe. Okay. Now that I've begun making videos, it was just bound to happen. And it really didn't take long. It took what, like 4 or 5 recorded videos before I just did it. And it's not intentional. It's just the natural unfolding of things. A lot of creativity comes to me in the shower, which, by the way, that was a tip that a friend of mine gave me years ago about writing, is that if I was facing a block or struggling to go shower and then try again. And there's something about the movement of the water that does kind of get the mind going. So I recommend that for you as well. If you're creatively blocked in any way, step away from it, take a shower, listen to the water, and it does something. So here I am, just recording like this because why why wouldn't I? But getting down to it, so breath. Ironically enough, one of the near-death experiences I had was nearly dying from blood clots in my lungs. As you probably know, we do need our lungs to breathe. And when I was 25 years old, I had this horrible pain in my side, um, specifically my left side. Of course, it was my left side, my feminine side. And it was when I was teaching, and I had it throughout the day in the classroom, and it kept getting worse and worse and worse. And I remember saying to a coworker of mine and a student, I'm like, you know what? I feel like I broke my rib or something. Like this really, really hurts. And they kind of made fun of me. You know how people can be kind of dicks when it comes to like injuries and pain. Sometimes they're like, oh, okay. Like they did not take it seriously, but I'm like, no, fuck, like this hurts. And I thought, at the time my daughters were little, one of them was still in like an infant car seat, and I thought maybe I twisted wrong or something. And so I went to the chiropractor, and, of course, he had a reason why it was hurting according to his knowledge, but he was not at all trained to assess for a blood clot. So I actually got adjusted at the chiropractor, and at the time had blood clots in my lungs, but didn't know that. And as the evening went on, the pain just got worse and worse. So bad, I was on the floor, like clutching myself at home. And I was home alone with my two daughters at the time, and I was just in excruciating pain in my side. I had no idea what it was, just that it's like this there's a reason this hurts this bad. I mean, I would compare it to labor pains, quite honestly. It was that level of like, okay, this is like a contraction, but in my side. And so I called a friend of mine to come and watch my daughters and actually drove myself to urgent care, and bless the doctor there. She thought to test my blood because there's some kind of indication of whether or not you have blood clots and certain blood tests they can do. And she thought to test, and sure enough, I had elevated levels of whatever it was that it can indicate blood clots. They did a little scan, and there were several blood clots in both my lungs. And it was kind of like they were bigger ones that had sort of like exploded and dispersed. And that was one of the most terrifying moments of my life. Like I mean, people die from that shit, Like if I had just taken ibuprofen and gone to bed, and it would have gone into my heart or into my brain, and I never would have woken up the next day. And I was 25 years old with two young daughters. And had I not paid attention to my pain, and again, bless the doctor who recognized it, I'd be dead. And It was caused by the birth control pill that I was on, you know. That's a real thing, by the way. Of course, you know, the ways that drugs have been developed to control women's reproductive, you know, freedom end up in our death. You know, it's actually crazy to me that they could release a medication like that that's capable of killing someone. But it's like, oh, it's just women. Yeah, their lives are disposable, right? Like that's probably the attitude of some of the people who created that. And so it was caused by the birth control pills I was taking. I don't have any kind of clotting disorder or anything like that. What I do probably have now is like a ton of radiation in my body because several years after that, like I had pains, but it was because of the scar tissue in my lungs. But, you know, you go through something like that, you get paranoid. And so I've had a million CT scans because anytime a pain would return, I would get paranoid like 7 years after that and check. But I'm okay, other than probably excessive amounts of radiation exposure. But what are you going to do? The point is, that that's a real thing, you know, reproductive medication almost killing women. But the great news is too that I was past the point of, you know, being able to sue. It was like, ah, no, if you almost died between this year and this year, you can sue and we'll pay you for almost taking your life, but you're just outside of that margin, so you get nothing. God, okay. But I survived. And the reason I survived is because I paid attention to my pain. Okay. If there were ever like a clear shining example of how important it is to pay attention to our pain and not numb ourselves to it, that's it. So one of these big near-death experiences I had was literal blood clots in my lungs. And had I not paid attention to how bad it hurt and done something about it, I'd be gone. So pay attention to your pain, folks. Don't numb it. Get things checked out physically, you know, but also how do you translate that to maybe an emotional learning experience? Well, I think something we're conditioned to do, especially when it comes to heartbreak, right? Like, let's say you experience a breakup. If you're anything like me, when you experience a breakup or some turbulence in your relationship, you might think, like, our go-to is, oh, I guess I don't deserve love. Oh no, I experienced another loss. Oh, this didn't work out again. This hurts. It keeps hurting. I guess I'm just not meant to have this. So the solution is to numb. All I can do is numb this because I lost it again. My heart's broken again. The only solution is numbing. I can relate to that. You know, I did that for a long time when things that I thought were love didn't work out. But what if you are meant to have real love, real commitment, a supportive partner, and that's why it hurts? You know, our pain shows us where the wound is, and wounds aren't meant to stay wounds. Wounds are meant to heal and to teach and to protect. And so, what if that heartbreak, what if this pain is an indication of something you can learn about love from the relationship, but also what if your pain is an indication that you are meant to heal, that you are meant to have a committed relationship? It's just meant to look like something else. Instead of numbing yourself or just going to bed, what if you take the indication of that hurt and you let it guide you towards your next path? Because now that I can reflect on this, you know, near-death experience that happened in my lungs, it's like, yeah, this medication nearly took my breath away. And what I learned from almost dying, you know, from the organs being poisoned that hold my breath, is that my breath is precious. Just like you're precious. That part of you that's been wounded, that part of you that's been disrespected by some dick, or maybe they weren't a dick. Maybe it just the values didn't align. Well, they are meant to align somewhere else. So just take some time with this pain. Pay attention to it. Where does it hurt and why? You know, ask yourself why. What is it about this that hurts? Because that can give you a clue into where you belong and where things maybe, you know, why this particular situation maybe wasn't right. You know, for example, was this relationship about someone else's expectations, and are you hurt because you feel like you didn't fulfill certain expectations? Or are you hurt because they're not who you thought they were? Because they showed you a false image? Well, Now, what can you look for in the right person? What did it teach you about your values and your worth? You are not broken up because you're unworthy. You're broken up because you're worthy of something better. Please don't numb yourself to whatever this heartbreak is. And it doesn't just have to be about a romantic relationship. It can be about a job, a layoff. I know like the working world is just crazy right now, and people are getting laid off for things that are not their fault. I can relate to that too. It didn't happen to me once. It happened to me like 4 times where I was laid off due to budget cuts. That hurts. And it hurt me because I knew that I was good at my job. I put my whole heart into my job and I felt like I was punished for it. It wasn't that I didn't deserve, financial stability and a place to share my passions and help connect people. It's just that it wasn't in the right environment. It was in an environment that was mismanaging its budget. So let me direct my energy and my breath towards a place that's going to respect it. So those are some of the short-term lessons, but the long-term lesson and part two of this episode is about our breath. Because mine was nearly stolen. I literally have a wound, a forever scar tissue, which still occasionally flares up related to my breath. So it's like, okay, what can this wound, this physical wound of literally almost dying from having poison in my lungs, what can it teach me about the value of breath? Not only can learning breathing techniques calm us, but our breath can also spark passion. So today I don't have my phone with me to look up the notes, because really just fresh out of the shower. But I did listen to the Mel Robbins podcast for the first time today in a while. And she had the dream doctor on, which is why I wanted to listen to it, because it's the neuroscientist who talks about dreams. So I forget his name, but if you go to Mel Robbins, like her most recent episode as of today, June 29th, it's the dream doctor. And he said something that, of course, captured my attention. And he said that one of the greatest evolutionary accomplishments of human beings is that we are storytellers. He literally said that's one of our greatest evolutionary advantages is that we are storytellers. And what do we tell our stories with? Our breath. And I'm talking about every kind of story. Yes, I'm talking about the stories that the actors show on TV and in movies. I'm talking about the gossip. I'm talking about every story, like our version of what happened, their version of what happened. I'm talking about our passion, our poetry, everything. All of that requires breath. And I'm here today to encourage you to tell the right kind of stories, to seek the right kind of stories. You know that I'm very passionate about stories, which is why I get so pissed off about things like Love Island and about all these reality TV shows that glamorize escapism, glamorize dopamine hits, because people are putting energy into telling those stories. People are putting their precious breath into telling those stories. My friends, if our storytelling abilities are one of our greatest evolutionary advantages, accomplishments, everything, my God, let's put it into something that matters. Start telling the right kind of stories, because guess what? Maybe those stories are the things that will spark change. And maybe if there's enough of them being told about compassion, empathy, kindness, about resilience, because everybody loves a good hero story. Maybe we just need to get to a place where our heroes don't necessarily look like Captain America. You know, maybe we need to tell stories about the hero next door, literally the person who goes out of their way to. Okay, no, I'm gonna tell you one. My neighbor across the street who was there on that fateful night where my husband was attacked by his ex-wife and saw the cop cars and everything. The next day, like after finding out that we were okay, she brought over this kind little poem with this sort of inspirational religious kind of message on it and left it at my doorstep. The antidote is never far from the poison because guess what? I still remember that. In the wake of that tragedy, I remember that neighbor's action. Maybe we should start telling stories about the people who put the pieces in place to heal. If you look at the dedication in my book, She Death's Reflection, which again is all about, a magical way of healing from the tragedy that narcissists commit, I dedicated it to 4 women. And I said, one woman tried to destroy my life, 4 more saved it. And those 4 women, one was a student, who read the first book, Monsters, and saw its value to healing domestic violence and said some very kind words about it. One was my PTSD trauma therapist who did EMDR techniques that helped me write She Death's Reflection, but also showed me how my brain could heal itself. One was the therapist who helped both my husband and I to heal from that. And then the other one was a specialist when it comes to just, relationship wounds in general and how we can seek out the right things. So maybe we should start telling more stories about the people who are healing, whether it's a gesture of putting something on someone's doorstep, kind words, or the women who are using their breath every day to heal other women's brains and it's not that they're doing the healing for them, it's showing other women their power. Lately I've been feeling really inspired to write thank you cards to all the female doctors in my life, because I've had a couple female physical therapists who are helping me with my jaw and my pelvis and my back. And there's another, female professional who helps me with my son when I go to these appointments. And lately I've been writing them thank you cards. That's a good use of your breath. To either tell the people in your life who are healing you thank you, or just, use your breath to kind of power your body to pick up your pen and write that down. We can't underestimate the power of the healers in our lives and the power of thanking them, because the work that we do on an individual level spreads to the collective. We have to tell stories of gratitude, both to the people who we are grateful for, but also to the people who need to hear about the remarkable things that they're doing. Because the whole point of my fuck his show thing is I'm so tired of bullies at the microphone, of them being the only ones who get to tell the stories. Stories are a greatest evolutionary feat, my friend, which means they have the power to change things. So use your breath when you're angry. Use your anger to speak about the kind of compassion that you want to see. Anger shouldn't just be dismissed and ignored. It's not just toxic. Passion's right there along with it. A lot of the things that we're angry about are also the things that we have the power to change. So speak up. About whatever it is, speak up. Tell the right kinds of stories. Write that story. I know there's some of you out there who have a memoir or an autobiography you need to write. You've survived some pretty amazing things, haven't you? You've done some pretty amazing good in the world. I know you have. I can feel it. Tell your story. Tell the story of the person next door who helped you. Tell the story of that book you read that inspired you. The world needs to hear it. And the bullies are not the only ones with microphones. It's the stories that are told after tragedy that make change. I would love to get to a point where we can tell stories before something tragic happens and get out in front of it, And my dear friend, Nicole Smith Holt, is a perfect example of that. I mean, she's remarkable. But it was because of the story she told of losing her adult son to type 1 diabetes because he couldn't afford his insulin because of the greed of big pharma. It was that story that spread later that maybe finally, after she got arrested a couple times for, trying to protect healthcare and speaking out about unfair, healthcare laws and things like that, after all that, okay, yeah, maybe we should pass a bill that should cap prices on life-saving medication that takes $3 to $5 to make for 1 vial, but are being charged $1,200 for well, I guess it was technically like $395 for 1 vial. That takes $3 to $5 to make. Yeah. Okay. So she told that story of what happened to her son and caught attention because people were like, what? He died because he couldn't afford his medication? Yeah, that's fucked up. Maybe we should get out in front of things like that so it doesn't happen. But it was her story that caught fire and made change. I believe that we have the power to tell healing, progressive stories before tragedy. We have the power to tell stories that will create change, that will then create safety. Stories are how we have evolved, my friends. Stories are what capture attention. And maybe instead of click culture, we need to get back to depth culture, where we start listening again, where we start taking in wisdom again. And that starts with you telling your story too. Use your breath to tell that story. Use your breath. Stop putting your breath, which takes so much precious energy, into talking about the person who's never going to change and just going to bring you down. This is where that boundary setting thing comes in, because you know who I'm talking about in your life who's never going to change. You have more power to create some distance from them than you think. It might take a couple uncomfortable conversations, or it might take you kind of unplugging from the gossip culture of your work lounge and maybe instead going to talk to the person who, carries some wisdom and things like that. It might take some of those habit changes, but it's worth it. It's absolutely worth it. Your breath and what you use it for matters. And don't think that just because you don't have as loud of a microphone yet as some of the bullies in the media who everybody can't help but share, don't think that your breath doesn't matter. It does. The stories you tell matter. It's how we've evolved, and it's how we will continue to evolve. And I can't emphasize that enough. So I'm glad I survived this near-death experience that occurred in my lungs. I'm glad that I can look at this now. How old am I? 38. This happened when I was 25. I'm really bad at math. That's like 13 years ago, right? Something like that. No, that's not right. Yeah, oh my God, that is right. Wow. Yeah, okay. That was a while ago. I'm glad that even though, the scar tissue still occasionally causes me pain, it taught me something. The value of breath, of paying attention to our pain. And then, once we've learned how to heal and we've done the hard work of healing, then the healing we can continue to spread in the world through our breath, through our stories, through putting our energy into the right causes. Please don't ever think that your voice doesn't matter. Don't ever think that what you put your breath into doesn't matter. I think it's time many of you started redirecting it to the right kind of stories, and believe in the power that you have to change yourself, your family, your community, and the world for the better. And another good way to spread good stories is by sharing this podcast, which I know some of you are doing, by the way. Thank you. You bring me so much joy when I see that it's kind of spreading, like through the data that I can see in your community. Thank you. And on that note, I think I might need to take a trip to Japan soon. I think some really, really cool things are happening over there. So, Japan, if you'll have me, I'd love to have you, like not in like a sexual way. Had to make it weird, but in like I'd like to get to know you better. My heart's kind of pulling me in that direction. Because God knows, oh, the US needs some help right now. So anyway, thank you to all my listeners. Thank you. I really mean that. And thank you for sharing this. And I believe in you. And I recorded this now at this hour because I know that some of you out there have a story that you need to tell. I know that some of you out there need to save some of the energy that you're putting into gossip or complaining about the person who will never change. Take a deep breath and see where you can redirect that in a way that gives you your power back and in a way that gives power to the kind and compassionate people who should be running this world. But in the meantime, thanks for coming.